Whereas I feel exactly what they're trying to do to me is I think microdosing basically fortifies ego, macrodosing reduces it. And I say it in the sense of like the default mode network in terms of what it does in neuroscience, that if you kind of look at it at such a large dose, to go back to Charlie Manson or whatever, if they're then encouraging us to take these big doses and then we're having, oh, yes, we're going to change the world and be brilliant and feel wicked for like 6 months and then realize we can't because the system hasn't changed, as you say, we're then re-traumatized, we go back in, we get the same thing. Whereas that system of the trap wouldn't exist if they were taking the same fucking doses. I can't help but feel it. If they were in the woods hugging a fucking tree, do you know what I mean? Like if they were in a circle taking ayahuasca, if they had some experience with some of these compounds, they wouldn't. You can't. They don't work together. This is what's always confusing me about corporate psychedelics. Is an oxymoron, but this is the reality we live in. Do you know what I mean? Is that just my suspicion about the macro versus micro?
No, but even the term psychedelics has been kind of it's questionable what it means anymore, because I've made this joke a number of times, but like the two flagship molecules at the vanguard of the psychedelic renaissance are an amphetamine and a horse tranquilizer, right? It's MDMA and ketamine. And while I value both of these substances and have tried them on numerous occasions, I'm sorry, but that's so different than taking 3 rips of DMT or of macrodosing mushrooms. Like it's a very different universe, a very different experience. And I think that something like MDMA, like to me, I don't know if that's a psychedelic, and that's not to knock MDMA. I think it's a wonderful tool or a wonderful substance. But like when you're having MDMA, I don't know how many people are having these deep realizations that, they don't want to go back onto the assembly line tomorrow. And that should be okay. I think that, I'm a big fan of cognitive liberty myself, but like if someone wants to kind of just like go do their own thing and they're not bothering anyone and they don't want to be a productive member of society, quote unquote, what the fuck is wrong with that, right? And that is I think a path that's going to become more and more attractive to a lot of people. And we're seeing it as like, man, I just want to get out of here, get my acre, do my homestead, raise some chickens and a vegetable plot, and not, not be beholden to this really expensive, really gaslit society, I think, that we're living in right now. And I value a lot of the, trappings of modern society. Like I'm, pretty okay with a lot of things, but also like these crazy rising costs of living, the fact that like technology is getting so much better, but like why is housing getting so much harder to secure for so many people? Why are professionals I know renting? Why, like all these things I think are not just an accident of macroeconomics. I think that there are forces in play, and I've lived among some of these forces, so I'm familiar with what it looks like to be kind of at the top of the pyramid, so to speak. And I question that. I think a lot of these companies and who's getting funded in psychedelics, it's tied to family offices. It's tied to philanthropists, quote unquote. But when your philanthropists are multi-billionaires who run hedge funds, who are involved in regulatory capture, you start questioning a little bit about like who's benefiting from this iteration or this version of the psychedelic renaissance, right? And I think like a lot of academia, a lot of industry, like they're clearly tied together, right? Like you can call something science all you want, but if your study design and your clinical trials and your path to market are being explicitly funded by certain individuals or special interest groups, like that's going to leave a lot of other potential scenarios on the table, and it's going to be very much in favor of powerful interests. And it becomes quite difficult to push back against that, because a lot of times, like, especially for the average person, you have no idea how this stuff works, So I guess I'm trying to be as cooperative as possible and recognize that I can only do so much. And like, again, just doing ridiculous, absurdist satire is honestly a lot more fun than being a muckraking, dirt digging journalist, trying to cast aspersions at the man. Like that has its place. But if, for my money, if South Park can exist, if Sacha Baron Cohen can exist, like that's where I want to stack my chips, because if I can be successful and hopefully at some point, be super economically viable with what I'm doing, it's been solid, but I think there's a lot of room to grow. Like if I can do that, satirizing the king and playing the role of the court jester, I'm happy to do that all the time. Then I also, because I'm very aware that I am definitely, on the on the radar in some ways, or people paying attention to what I'm doing. Like I want to be diplomatic. I'm not trying to be some whistleblower on everyone. Like so oftentimes, like I do have a direct line of communication to some of these more corporate interests, just to be like, hey, how's it going? I want to have I don't want it to be a us versus them scenario always, because us will probably have a really hard, difficult battle to fight if it's little old us versus, extraordinarily powerful forces with all the money in the world.